Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Linsly Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper. Welcome back, everybody, to It's Time. Today, we're going to start a new series.
Yes, this is such a fun series.
Such a fun series. The science behind
the woo.
The woo.
The science of the woo. I'm so excited.
Okay, so what is the woo? Let's first of all define what this whole series is going to be, and then we're going to start with part one.
Yes. Okay, so when we talk about the woo, it's all of the things that fall into that kind of abstract category, like manifestation or spirituality or affirmations.
Mantra.
Okay. And today's topic is luck, right? So these are topics that, historically would fall in the category of sensory, or you just have to believe them, or, they're just kind of out there without data-driven results. And you and I are so deep into data-driven results, and we embrace the woo.
Yes.
So this is the intersection. This is the science behind why some of these things that feel like woo actually have concrete outcomes.
And I think it's also the science behind. So we're going to talk today about luck, right?
Yes.
And we all have people in our lives, in our families, who seem luckier than others. Or
Yes.
Why do good things keep happening to this particular person? Not that you want bad things to happen, but what is it about their being that seems to, quote unquote, attract good luck?
Yeah. So we'll get into a little bit of the science of being lucky.
Okay.
And then, so what do you do with that? Like, what's the takeaway? If you want to be luckier, what can you go do? So we'll get into that, but we'll kick this off because you and I do so much research in mindset and optimism and things that are like happiness drives data-driven results of higher success, higher health, etc. So this topic of luck, I got kind of interested in and dove into this research around the luck factor. I think it was the book that kind of kicked off this body of work. It's Richard Wiseman was, I think he did this like in 2003 is when it kicked off. And so there's lots of follow-on studies behind it. But he basically asked this question, like, what makes people lucky? And so it is a very broad research study that he did where he would categorize thousands of people as, do they perceive themselves as lucky or not? And then a series of factors of positive outcomes, financial, health, things like that.
Does he define luck in a certain way?
Well, it depends on the vector. So are you financially lucky? Are you lucky in love? Relationship.
Okay. So the context around how we're using the word luck.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or the environment it's put into.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say he was like, let's go into the casinos and see who's like lucky on the bets.
Got it. Okay.
You can't game this and become really good with your bookie. It's not that. It's more like life luck.
Sorry to disappoint. We're not going to teach you how to pick the winning lottery ticket.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
All right. Life luck.
And so, not surprisingly, one of the main factors of luck is how you perceive yourself, right? Okay. So you can decide to start perceiving yourself as lucky as just a simple thing to do. But there were kind of four elements that people who were lucky perceived themselves as lucky, and externally other people thought they were lucky. Okay. There are these kind of four traits or behaviors that they all exuded.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the interesting part for us. It's
for
like,
sure.
Right, who cares if you can be lucky or if you can't do anything about it, right? So these were kind of the four behavior traits. And the first one is not that surprising, but it's like lucky people tend to be extroverted and tend to put themselves out there in more opportunities. So makes sense, right? They just have a larger in. So the percentage of being lucky, it just increases.
Absolutely.
The absolute outcomes through that percentage, right?
And I think that applies in so many places. We talk a lot about women in leadership and getting the opportunities that they, quote unquote, feel that they deserve or that they want. But one character trait, especially of women in the workplace that we've studied quite a bit, is we don't ask for what we want. We don't, I'm going to use another word, manifest that into all of these different conversations. And so until we start to engage with people and say, gosh, even just discussing casually these ideas, then people are like, oh yeah, they said they were interested in doing that once. Maybe I'll call them and see if they're still interested, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so it seems lucky because maybe those encounters are distant, but yet you planted that seed a long time ago.
Right. So it is exactly that behavior. So he went in and categorized what were the action items that people who were luckier were doing. And they were doing the things that we maybe kind of, scrunch up our face on, is like they were networking. They were going out every night. They were going to all the meetings. They were talking in the meetings. So that they were just increasing the touch points, which would increase your odds.
Yes.
So that's it's a behavior choice. And it doesn't mean if you're an introvert, you can't be lucky, but it does mean that if you are an introvert, you might consider increasing some of your external data points when you're trying to find a luck arena.
Or saying yes. I mean, I think that's a big one, right? Like, it's really easy to get in our comfort zone and say no when these different opportunities. I'm too busy. I have this with the kids. I need to do that. And instead of saying yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to get out there.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, I think I have the most recent example of this in my own life is an opportunity that has just a big opportunity that just came up. Only happened because I said yes to an activity that I was pretty set on saying no to.
You were tired.
I was tired and I was going to cancel this trip, and it has now led to a different career path and career option. And I tend to be introverted in those settings. And so just even the few times you start to say yes, also reflect back on the good things that have come from that, because it then reinforces the behavior of doing that again.
Yes. And you are going to get into, that's one of the principles. So a second thing that these researchers found is that the people who were lucky or luckier also gave a lot of credence to their own intuition and gut. So they listened to themselves, and they actively trained themselves to listen to themselves and acted on their intuition. So the idea that intuition is just as true as a fact, an external fact, is the reality that it's a truth that's known by you, whereas facts maybe are known by everyone, or truths known by everyone. Intuition is a truth just as deep and applicable, but it's just your truth. And so this was a trait that people who were luckier tended to reinforce in themselves was, I always listen to my gut. I act on things when I can feel the right action. I check in with my gut, and it always leads me the right way. So it doesn't mean that you're never going to have a bad instinct, but it does mean that trusting your instinct is a path forward in which choice to pick.
Do these things, my guess is there's synergy between them, right? So the more often that you maximize these chance opportunities and then listen to your gut along the way, is there data behind, and I know it's hard to quantify. I don't even know if you could put even numbers behind it. But my guess is they exponentially impact each other.
Well, because they're just reinforcers, right? They're amplifiers. Yes. And so one of the things about, okay, well, how do I increase my gut or my instinct? That seems like an odd thing to do. He also then researched how you build that muscle. And so there were things that you can do every day. You can literally just be like, how do I feel about breakfast? This or this, and just listen to what you feel and do. So you train yourself to listen to yourself and act on what you think is a way to build your intuition muscle.
And I think that's so important, right? I mean, we talk about a lot of things, but we just have recently talked a lot about nutrition. Yeah. And we can say, I love that example of breakfast. What am I thinking? And this is what my body's telling me that I need a lot of times. And that comes from our gut, is like, I need some protein right now, or I need this right now. Yeah. And instead of then getting caught in the weeds, that then is kind of step 2 of our mind. Well, but if I do that, then this and that, and then we get so off course versus just learning how to make those decisions and listen. Critically the first time.
Listen to your voice and hear it. So lucky people have this intuition, and kind of the science behind it is the reticular activating system. My doctor, you have to correct me on that.
Nope, you got
RAS, which is an actual part of your brain that helps you filter for the right information, right? That's the science behind your intuition. I thought that was kind of a fascinating component to it. The third thing, and this is not that much of a surprise when we think about all the research around optimism and happiness, and we've talked about this in our mindset conversations, is that people who are luckier tend to expect to be luckier. Like, they are optimists about their luck. So they are expecting that they're going to find the $5 on the ground when they're walking. They're expecting that they're going to get introduced to the right person. So their self-perception is that they are lucky, and they kind of are optimists about their luck, and it's a reinforcing filter.
That is so interesting to me, because I'm thinking of the people in my life who consider themselves lucky. And I wonder, and I don't know if you know if there's any data behind this. I don't know of any data behind this. How many times do you have to, quote unquote, have good luck to then start to consider yourself lucky and develop that mindset?
Well, it's interesting, because when these researchers were quantifying, do you perceive yourself as lucky or not, and they were trying to look for metrics, they actually didn't find that people who called themselves lucky or people who called themselves unlucky had like different levels of good events in their life.
Interesting.
It was like how they perceived it. And so, they did run a piece of this analysis where they're like, all right, we're going to do, pick a winning lottery number exercise. And the people who perceived themselves to be lucky didn't pick better numbers than the unlucky. Like they weren't actually luckier. They just perceived themselves as in their areas of life that they were going to be luckier.
Interesting. I think this is fascinating, right? I'm a little lost for words even, but this is Linsly bringing me new knowledge today. And I'm just fascinated by this idea that, so I guess I've considered myself an unlucky or kind of learn the hard way person most of my life. And so it's just interesting to know the power of the mind. And if we can change the way we talk to ourselves, change the way that we look, the perception of our situation. And that doesn't mean all of our situations are good. That doesn't mean we haven't had hardship and unlucky things happen, but learn to focus on the positive, and then that continues to reinvent itself. It's just fascinating.
Well, then you're getting to the four things. Look at you. You're like instinctively, intuitively got this thing. So that is the other thing that they found that people who are luckier do, is that they're constantly reframing bad experiences into positive learning moments again and again. So they had bad experiences, but they look at them and go, wow, that's a bad experience. What am I going to get out of this? How do I learn from this? What am I doing? So they have that reframing and rewiring muscle.
Interesting.
That they are kind of rolling through their life.
This is a lot in 10 minutes. I'm a little overwhelmed. I really am. I'm a little overwhelmed because I think that, this is the hardest part of this umbrella of performance that we talk about for me, is the more spiritual, theoretic, like I understand going to the gym, getting a result. I understand nutrition principles, getting a result. But this idea of mindset and all of these tools that we can use, I fully believe in them. It's just a harder thing for me to grasp. And I think some of that is just being so hardcore science driven for a long time. And so I love the science behind this, that it is actually there. But we still have to get people over that threshold to try it.
It is. So it's like the conversation we had about plasticity.
Right.
Each one of these elements of the woo, the reason they are compelling and appealing to us is because now we understand that neuroplasticity is what's driving it. Right. You're literally rewiring your brain to perceive yourself as lucky. You're literally rewiring your brain to listen more to your own internal intuition to get you to the right answer faster, because it's synthesizing a set of facts for you in a way that you just hadn't understood.
Okay. And this is another question for you. And this is a totally on the spot question, so we may not know the answer. Is there a gender difference in who deems themselves lucky or not?
There wasn't. I had that same question. And there wasn't a gender difference, and there wasn't a socioeconomic difference. There wasn't a cultural difference.
Interesting.
And there was not, if I'm remembering correctly, I'll have to double check. I don't think there was an age bracket difference either. It wasn't like with experience, you got luckier.
Interesting. Because I'm trying to think of the people in my life who I would externally deem lucky. And I don't know if they internally describe themselves that way or not. It's almost all men when I think of it. Yeah. And I don't know why. And I don't know if that is because maybe they are more extroverted and talk about it more, and women tend to be maybe more self-deprecating in some of these areas, even if they internally feel it. Maybe they're not as willing to share it. I don't know. But that's why I asked that question, is like when I'm just cataloging my life and going through the Rolodex really quick, and who would I describe as lucky? I feel like more men come onto that list than women, but I also don't know if that's just a different type of interaction. And sometimes maybe men feel a little more comfortable talking about accomplishments or good fortune instead of women, because we don't want to ever feel like we're bragging or
showing off.
Yeah, exactly. So we tend to downplay some of those situations. So maybe that's another opportunity for ourselves, our communities, our kids that another even behavior tool that we can start to model is it's okay to celebrate your good luck.
It is. And so modeling it and then also welcoming it when somebody else celebrates it, right?
Yeah.
Is like, tell me more.
Right.
Tell me more. So anyway, those, when you think about those four levers, they're not like, oh, that's mind blowing. Yeah. Okay. You're extroverted. So you increase the number of chances on the board because you've got more chances going out the door. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. You're luckier because you're faster to a good decision because you listen to your intuition. You can see that. All right. You're luckier because you are an optimist and you perceive good things are going to happen to you. So your brain is filtering for those things and sees the good things that are happening for you. And then you find a way to find the silver lining and reframe. Okay, that's very behavior and choice-based set of activities that you can go. I'm going to reinforce those four things. But then you're like, okay, what then do I go do to try to build that?
So if I want to work on being a luckier person?
Yeah.
What do I need in this toolkit? We've talked about the categories. How do I execute that?
You go do it. That is a great question. And I think a lot of these things are familiar to us because we do it in the mindset work, but it's maybe just doing it with the nuance that I'm thinking of myself as luckier, right? So first of all, just telling yourself, even if it's a goofy thing like we talked about when we would open our eyes in the morning saying it's going to be a good day, just kind of layer that it's going to be a good day and I am lucky today. Those sorts of affirmations, that's a tool that you can do to kind of reinforce that. We talked about getting out there more and being open and having more yeses. So just kind of getting out the door and taking a look and surveying the opportunities that are in front of you. It's the balance between not overdoing it and killing yourself, but also just maybe just putting a little extra on so you get to increase your odds. There's the gratitude journaling, because the gratitude journaling reinforces these are all the good things that are happening to me. And so that is a reinforce of I am lucky. And so you can gratitude journal with that kind of a filter in it as well. And then just there's a mindset that's been coined called a serendipity mindset, which is you have a perspective that serendipity, things are going to happen your way. So again, another way of telling yourself that you're going to be lucky.
And I'm wondering if people, because as we're sitting here talking about this, I almost feel like lucky's not the right word, right? Because lucky, we relate to chance so often. And whether you are the gambler at the blackjack table, those who do it well, there's a huge skill involved, right? Yeah. It is not left to luck. They have moved beyond that. And so I'm almost wondering, like, we almost use lucky as a catch-all when I agree, these people have the mindset to connect with others. They have the skill set to trust their gut and have developed that by doing exactly what you're doing of saying, okay, I'm not going to overthink this. I'm going to make a decision and go and make a decision and go. And I'm going to practice that skill in safe choices. Like, what am I going to have for breakfast?
Yeah.
Which way am I going to drive to the supermarket? Right? Like, I'm just going to make these choices today and trust my gut, and then embracing the positive. And I think that one is huge, because I think you can probably take a quote unquote unlucky person and a quote unquote lucky person and show them things about each other's life. And the unlucky person would only focus on negative things. And the lucky person is only going to focus on the positive things. So again, going back to that neuroplasticity idea of imprinting those pathways, creating those neural superhighways to help us do these things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the experiments that he ran with a group of people that categorized themselves as lucky or unlucky was the one where there was like a $5 bill on the floor before the people walk in the door. And that one to me was fascinating, because that one, the lucky people did find it at a much higher proportion than the unlucky people, because they are on the lookout for good things to happen. So it is that they're looking for good things and then they find those good things. And the unlucky people would just not see the $5, so that there were so many of these little micro experiments. I totally recommend the book, because it's fascinating how luck was defined, categorized, impacted. And it's not chance. It's more like you've increased your odds of good things happening in your day.
Okay.
It is not just chance.
Yeah.
That's always, to me, a little bit freeing, because then it's your behavior choices.
Absolutely.
You can choose your behavior choices.
Absolutely. So again, ways to kind of embrace this lucky mindset are: one, say yes.
Yeah.
Just start saying yes.
Increase your odds.
Increase your odds, right? 2 is let's practice our intuition.
Yeah.
3, let's look at the positives. So whether this is a gratitude practice, whether it's reflection, however you want to say.
It could be a Losada's ratio again. Here it comes again, 3 to 1, positive to negative.
Yep.
So all of that is a manageable and measurable way to do it.
Yep. And then what should be our 4th?
The 4th is reframing negative for positive. So that is an active choice to be like, hey, you know what? There's a bunch of traffic right now. This is not going my way. However, I'm going to listen to that podcast. It's making yourself reframe the negative into a positive is actually a muscle to build.
100%. And I think it's so easy to get on that other spiral.
Yeah.
Of I'm unlucky, and so I don't say yes to things, and I dwell on the negative, and I don't find the positive. Like, it just, you can see how that spiral goes and how it's hard to break.
Yeah.
Hard to break out of.
So that's our short and sweet episode on the first one of the science of the woo.
Thank you.
Get lucky.
Okay.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show. And we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.